I know that most of you expected the next 10 years of C64 video first, but I'm having a tough week. With not much time to spare, so I figured that another Obscure DOS video would be easier for me to prepare and release. Especially that I already had games picked up, enough for 2 episodes, so it was a no-brainer. The C64 is coming, don't worry, but this one's first. So, not to put you to sleep with this already too long intro, let's see what's on the menu for today. Moonbase is interesting. For all intents and purposes, it's your simplified SimCity, but on the moon. Your goal is to establish a thriving colony, maximize your profits from shipments to Earth, and most importantly get to the point in which the colony will be self-sufficient. You have a certain budget that you need to distribute between erecting of new structures, production of essentials such as air, water, heat and power, and items for sale on Earth. You start in mineral and elements-rich plot, which is otherwise plain and devoid of anything human and life-sustaining. So, initially, as bare minimum, you'll need to build shelters and life support facilities, with time adding more varied structures serving different purposes. At the time of its release in 1990, Moonbase was probably the most advanced and realistic simulation of its kind. But it's not because of its complexity, and only because it had no real competition. In fact, if you compare it to SimCity, it seems simplistic and very limited in what and how can you do in it. Does it make it a bad game though? Not in the slightest. It's fun for what it is, and if you ever wanted to be a space engineer, lunar architect, interstellar designer, or hold any other yet non-existent job title, there was hardly anything better in 1990. It's not a game for action freaks, joystick cowboys, keyboard jockeys and shooter aficionados, but if you like slower, more methodical games that require having those brain cells of yours work and heat up, you'll love it. They won't overheat, but Moonbase can definitely provide a couple of hours of entertainment with what it offers. Elevators from Hell is a fan-made port of arcade original Elevator Action. The objective of the game is to collect all 7 tokens, 1 on each floor, and then escape the building alive. Each of the floors has 2 sets of elevators, left and right, the elevator panel in the center and token in between the left elevator and the panel. Panel is used to call for an elevator, and it always calls the nearest one, regardless of which side is it. If that was it, however, the game would be simple and fast to complete, and it's anything but. There's a Robo guard patrolling the floors, and he will eliminate you with his laser when he gets nearby. While the game may not be as difficult as the original was, it is challenging nonetheless, as the guard is quite sneaky in fact. But fortunately, if you overlook more than simplistic graphic and sounds, the game is as addictive as arcade one was. Other than the presentation, the main difference between this and Elevator Action is the number of enemies. In Action, they randomly pop out from closed doors. In Hell, there's just one, the Robo guard. But he more than makes up for it with his AI. If you enjoy simple arcade titles and graphics are not a game breaker for you, Elevators from Hell is pretty fun. Jason Storm in Space Chase is a side-scrolling action-adventure platformer with an emphasis on the action. If the game looks to you like something you've seen before, then your eyes do not deceive you, cause you have. I mean, Duke Nukem, before 3D was stamped to its name, was a very similar game in its design and gameplay loop. So was Biomenace for that matter. Space Chase is divided into 3 parts, same as most shareware platformers were at the time, with first available for free and the full game unlocked via purchase. Interestingly enough, third episode/part was later re-released as a standalone title too. I don't know how successful that was, but since the game in its entirety is quite obscure, I doubt that the small chunk of it was any more popular. And it's a pity, cause despite simple 16-color EGA presentation, Space Chase is actually pretty good. Story-wise, you play as Jason and are sent on a mission of finding and destroying Evil Guys Incorporated. It's a rogue and evil organization bent on taking control of planetary government, and if that fails, destruction of all human life on Earth. Or both. Details elude me, but they're bad and that's what counts. The game will take you through their stronghold all the way to the final showdown in the fortress above Earth in the orbit. Space Chase is your typical PC shareware platformer of the time, and this had a very different design approach as compared to other platformers on systems like Amiga, and even more so when looking at the console games of the time. I mean, you could show me any 3 platformers released in the first half of 1990 on PC and 2 other platforms, and I could tell you which one came out on PC in a heartbeat. I'm sure you could too, that's how specific the design was. With omnipresent EGA presentation, often simple PC speaker or ad-lib music and sounds, jerky scrolling and odd character movement, either too fast or too jumpy. Space Chase actually supports Sound Blaster and scrolling is quite decent too, but the character movement and jumping especially is just rubbery for the lack of a better word, and weird feeling. Anyway, the levels are huge, having very maze-like design to them and requiring you to solve simple puzzles like finding right combinations of switches or keys for correct doors. It's a good example of a genre I like to call early 90s PC platformers and a decent but not great playing game, worth completing once. Hyperspeed is a follow-up to an earlier Lightspeed and probably the best game in this entire video, at least to me. It's a space combat role-playing set in, surprise surprise, space. Although it came before Frontier, it has a lot to do with it and earlier Elite too. And you're gonna like it, cause what you have to do in Hyperspeed is what you in particular do best. So save mankind. Yes, again. Your objective, if you choose to accept it, is to locate a suitable home for mankind after Earth that's nearly totally uninhabitable. So, you're sent off in your trusty ship to do just that. Oh, and if by any chance you don't choose to accept the mission, you'll still have to do it. Unwillingly perhaps, but you do. It's not mission impossible after all, but future of what's left of our race. The game features 4 large star clusters, each with its own difficulty level measured by kinds of aliens you meet there, their attitude towards you, combat encounters, and most importantly the overarching task/setting. While one cluster may have a despotic alien force ruling it with an iron fist and other races trying to survive under their oppression, the other may feature a sneaky plan that when implemented may save the universe, or destroy it, and you'll play instrumental part in either. Hyperspeed is really big. It features many different alien races, each with their own agendas, and each requiring different diplomatic approach, and they respond uniquely to your behavior. One may not like if you shoot back when fired upon, while others may respect your wins against their own aggressors as a sign of strength. Sometimes you'll enter direct relations with outwardly species, and sometimes you'll send probes to initiate contact from a safe distance without putting yourself at risk of direct encounter. Your ship components can be upgraded or replaced, so you'll be also maintaining that, trying to keep the vessel at peak effectiveness. Hyperspeed wouldn't be a good game, however, if it didn't feature trading, same as all great futuristic space operas do. So you'll also get to do that. You don't have to, but can. To summarize, you're to find a suitable Earth 2.0 candidate and then negotiate its use with the race that the planet belongs to. Graphics and sound design is really good too, and definitely above the industry average for 1991. Overall, if you enjoy expansive space RPGs playing similarly to Wing Commander or Elite, with a bit bigger and more serious plot and more proverbial meat on the bones, you'll love Hyperspeed. Amazon Guardians of Eden is a point-and-click adventure and one of the first titles to use SVGA graphics and digitized sounds. The game is a definition of a B-movie adventure and is designed to feel like. All the dialogues, cutscenes it's filled with, and even cliffhangers at the end of each chapter just scream B. And when you're in a mood for B, there's no A that you'd rather watch. Or play in this case. Cause if you're in the right mindset and want to get lost in an overacted, underperformed crazy scenario, to forget about your daily reality and troubles, there's just nothing better. It is set in 1957 and tells the story of Jason Roberts, who you play as, I must add, and whose brother was attacked during an expedition into the Amazon. And now Jason sets out on his own expedition to help his brother and find a long-lost treasure. The controls are pretty weird, as they feel like a stepping stone between the older control schemes and modern point-and-click ones. So, you move Jason with a keyboard, but use mouse to interact with the environment and for puzzling. Grand majority of these puzzles is inventory-based, although in some cases a correct dialogue choices may be necessary too. There are some small action sequences here and there as well, like riding a canoe for instance. Unfortunately, most of the puzzles require quick thinking, as if you don't act fast enough, Jason may get killed. This choice is also a leftover from an older epoch of adventure game design. Not something I enjoy in particular, but it is what it is. Oh, and you'll be hunting for pixel-sized objects too, so it's that kind of a game. Keep that in mind. The presentation, however, is of very high quality for the time, with all the characters digitized on beautifully drawn backgrounds, adding to the immersion and atmosphere of the over-the-top story. I forgot to mention before, but in some points you get to temporarily switch to a female lead too, so you can't complain about variety of gameplay really. Despite being able to find yourself in an irreversibly stuck position and death on seemingly every corner just a mouse click away, Amazon Guardians of Eden is actually really fun. And if you let yourself get drawn into its plot, you'll have a hell of a time. Robinson's Requiem takes place in a far future when humanity achieved faster-than-light travel, but still haven't explored the galaxy in its entirety. To charter new and unknown areas, explorers called Robinsons are sent out on scouting missions. Most of the time they're criminals and in general individuals deemed dangerous to society or otherwise unwanted. Even more so, their ships are usually sabotaged so that they could never come back. Grim, I know, but the future is not going to be sunshine and rainbows. We can see that already, we don't need video games for that. Anyway, you're one of those Robinsons, stranded on a remote alien planet and in contact with a mysterious telepathically gifted woman. As it turns out, she knows the best way off the planet, so you'll have to work together to escape. Robinson's Requiem mixes pre-rendered sprite character models with voxel terrain for environment, and is played from the first-person perspective, which may look awful today, but was actually head-turning back in the day. At any given point, the game keeps track of over 100 variables, from your character's temperature through any potential illnesses like flu or malaria, to various more and less dangerous injuries, which untreated may become infected and even lead to an amputation or death. Scary stuff, but I suppose that's how life on the frontier looks like, especially Space Frontier. All the tools and items you'll need to achieve your final goal you'll have to make yourself from ground up, and overall the game is a mixture of survival simulation with crafting. Robinson's Requiem is one of the most unusual and unique games not only of the time but to this day. So if you enjoy novel titles, it's definitely one not to sleep on. There's not that much I can say about The Last Eichhof. It is not only a freeware but also open source and one of the weirdest vertically scrolling shooters out there. In fact, it looks like something designed for early 8-bit machines given how much it gives into its design's craziness. So bear with me as I try to explain this oddity. You're a beer bottle. Yup, you may have thought that you were a person, but you were wrong. You're a beer bottle. Eichhof beer bottle to be precise, which I presume is a well-known brand in Switzerland. You tell me. I mean, if you're Swiss and happen to watch my videos, you should know. Anyway, you're a beer bottle, that's already established way too many times, and you fly in space fighting other competitive beer brands and alcohol kinds, shooting bottle caps at them. The more you destroy, the higher the score, which is actually not awarded in points but in liters of alcohol and money. Money that you can spend between the levels to purchase additional smaller side bottles that accompany your main one in your fight against other booze. Up to 6 of these can fly with you following at all times, and each next one is a huge help in your struggle. There's 5 levels in the game and most enemies are alcohol related in one way or another. So even if they're not alcohol bottles or brands per se, they may be items related to hangovers, so alarm clocks, coffee pots, aspirin, etc. Fear not, but they're far in between. In some levels you'll encounter mini-bosses, which are usually whole crates of rival beers and beer companies' logos, and these obviously feel more spongy and can take much heavier beating before giving in. The Last Eichhof is not a great game, but it's not inherently bad. It's just really unusual and everything about it screams promotion, which funny enough is actually not the case, as it was developed by an independent group called Alpha Helix as a commentary against concentration of Swiss beer market, which led to decline of smaller independent breweries, not unlike the titular Eichhof. Not often we get to talk about games that actually had something to say, had a message for the consumers, rather than just being games for the sake of it. So here you go, here's one. And good that it was made for a reason, because as a game, it's average at best. Dragon Isles is a top-down fantasy-themed RTS. The archipelago of Dragon Isles has been a home to a peaceful, loving nation for eons, until one day a hostile fleet arrived, nearly wiping them all off. Remnants scattered around the world, and any that survived went into hiding to remain silent for decades. Years later, a leader rose, gathered the best and strongest of what the nation still had, and set sail toward the archipelago to reclaim it. This is where you step in, as you'll once more have to save those that have been wronged in your ultimate quest for good. Don't know how you get to be such an amazing person, but somehow you are, and I respect that. Or as I wrote in my script draft, "Respectat." Makes no sense, but that's what I found in it. Must be my cat's making. Anyway, you start with a few simple warriors and settlers and have to build a thriving town, expand it to draft and support a huge army, and finally retake your motherland. That sounds stupid, let's try again. Blah blah blah, town, blah blah blah, army, and retake your Dragonland. Now that's better. Editor, scratch the first, keep the second one in. Oh wait, I don't have an editor. As in most RTSs, you'll be gathering resources, creating units, building and maintaining structures, repelling enemy attacks, and launching raids yourself. When all enemy units are taken care of and their buildings destroyed, the island is recaptured and you can move to the next one, usually a more demanding one. There are many different kinds of units available, each with their own usage scenarios, and they're for the most part a low fantasy fare of knights, archers, cavalry, war elephants and monks to name a few. But there are some more exotic ones as well, like spies and ninjas, so there's that. There's no fog of war whatsoever, so you can sort of keep tabs on what the CPU is doing and try to prepare for it and for your response accordingly. Dragon Isles is not the best RTS out there. I mean, if it was, you would have heard of it by now, but it's a decent one, so if you're into this, give it a try. Zeliard is a side-view role-playing platformer. Yes, you heard that right. and it's a game that originally came out on NEC PC 8801 before being ported to DOS. The ancient demon Yashakin, aka Emperor of Chaos, emerges from a 2000 years long slumber to unleash his wrath on the prospering and peaceful kingdom of Zeliard, seemingly in revenge for what happened ages ago, but that's irrelevant. He starts by summoning a 115 days long sun rain that turns the kingdom into a near-dead desert, and finishes off with turning King's only daughter, beautiful Princess Felicia, into a stone statue. You play as Knight Duke Garland, sent by the spirits to save the kingdom and princess. To do so, however, you must first recover 9 magical jewels, the so-called Tears of Esmesanti, and while going about it you must also slay the demon Jashin. The game world is divided into towns and dungeons. In towns you can rest in inns, visit banks, sages and shops where you purchase weapons and equipment, and if you can, you should remember about doing that anytime you'll get a chance, as this gear is your only help and the only thing you can rely on your adventure. Other than your unquestionable skill, that is. For the most part, with the exception of special buildings, there's no combat in towns whatsoever, so they're your de facto safe zones. Dungeons or labyrinths, depends how you wanna look at them, are a different case altogether. They're all uniquely designed and playing, and you'll fight hundreds of various enemies in them, regular and bosses alike. And this is also where you earn alamas from monsters. Alamas, as oddly named as they are, can be exchanged in towns for money or with NPCs for special quest items. Bosses drop the tiers upon defeat, and while the dungeons are quite big, the gameplay overall is rather linear and feeling more like a Castlevania title than the full-fledged RPG. While Zeliard remained unknown on PC even when it was relatively new, it's easily one of the more fun games in the side-scrolling platformer RPG mashup genre and worth completing even today. Metal and Lace: The Battle of the Robo Babes is not only the longest titled game in this video, but a sci-fi themed versus fighting game, and the only one that had a mature rating out of all I've spoke about today. Metal and Lace is set in the grim future of 2052 and features a cast of 7 female mecha robots that participate in a robot fighting tournament at Mecha Island. What mecha is, I do not know, but that's the term apparently. The game can be played in a single-player mode where you have to defeat series of opponents in one-on-one fights, or in versus mode against a friend, or associate or enemy. The game really doesn't check for that. Before starting off each fight, a player must pay an entry fee, and whoever comes on top in the 2 out of 3 rounds wins the fight. Interestingly enough, the health bar doesn't replenish between them, so you'll have to use money earned to buy energy batteries in the shop to refill it. There are offensive and defensive upgrades that can be purchased, and if you can only afford those, you should always invest, as these along with entry fees are the only things you can realistically spend the money on. So there's no reason to hoard it. Well, unless you're running some kind of a weird challenge playthrough, but I honestly don't see that happening. You can also purchase different armors. They all vary in stats, strong and weak points, and repetitive use of one makes it stronger with each next fight. So pick one that you like and stick with it. Metal and Lace features a pretty nice high-resolution, high-color presentation and enjoyable fighting mechanics with unique special moves for each character. It's perhaps not on the Street Fighter 2 or Mortal Kombat level, but it's fun the way it is. Interestingly enough, there are 2 versions of the game available, each released separately, a standard one and a mature one featuring partial nudity that was only available by mail order. Fans of versus fighters will definitely enjoy it, others will have to give it a go and make up their own minds about it. While talking about Metal and Lace, I've said interestingly enough twice. Well, 3 times now, and it's a sin against English language, so punish me the way you see fit. Or better don't, cause you know, I'm a silly foreigner and I know no better, right? I'm really happy with today's 10 games. They're literally all different, representing 10 unique genres and all have something that makes them worth playing. Perhaps they're not titles to play multiple times, but a singular playthrough of each is a must, if you have access to them, that is. And if you wanna try any of them out, I suppose as per usual they're either available online for purchase, or if not, no further than a Google search away. One way or another, let me know what you think of today's set and if any of them seem especially interesting to you. I'm already drafting a list of titles for the next one, so if you like this video, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It helps a lot. Around 70% of you are still not subscribed, and there's no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend the next video to you, other than by subscribing, that is. If you wanna be 100% sure that it does, however, hit the bell button too. Then when the video's out, you'll get a friendly notification letting you know about it. If you'd like to support this channel, Patreon subscriptions and YouTube memberships are a great help, and will go towards replacing my editing PC eventually. You'll also get access to all new videos a day early, and I post updates on what's coming and changing on the channel a few times a week. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are awesome too. Most of all, however, I would like to take a second here and thank all the YouTube Let's Play and playthrough creators, from whose videos short bits were taken for this one as a video background to my commentary. They're amazing, and thanks to their efforts, retro community can prevail for years longer and in better form than it could have otherwise. So thank you. For me though, this is all, so have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Peace.